Hello, my name is Kevin Beaver. I'm an independent information security consultant, writer, and speaker with Atlanta, Georgia-based Principal Logic. I often describe myself as a technical guy at heart who also sees the big picture of IT and security. I take this balance of experience and share it with my clients so they can adjust their habits and get better to uncheck those boxes that have been creating a false sense of security and unnecessary risks for some time. What you see here is one that I share in many of my presentations. I think it's quite fitting given what's going on with the SARS-CoV-2 virus and COVID-19 right now. If you look back just a few weeks, things were chugging right along. You had your security responsibilities that likely included a remote workforce, but nothing on the scale of what we are seeing today. The thing is, this is your testing time. Well, really, the past few weeks have been your testing time, but you're still on display. People are watching you to see how you handle this situation. Many people would crumble under situations like this, especially given how complex things can get with IT and security. But that's not you. That's why you're joining us on this webcast. You're probably a lot like me, and you're trying to take in all of this information and all these ideas that are being shared. And there's always a unique nugget or two that can truly help you in your situation. And that's my goal for today, to give you some immediate things that you can run with to minimize the risks associated with your new security reality, along with minimizing the impact when bad things do occur. Does that sound like a good goal? Okay, let's keep moving along. I was just looking at the Wall Street Journal and saw these headlines related to this coronavirus situation. Things impacting WhatsApp, Instagram, even CIOs who are facing shortages of things like laptops and other hardware to help deal with all this sudden remote workforce. And all of these represent security risks to your organization in some form or another. And this is just a small piece of your overall attack surface and risk posture. So what can you do? Well, I have a few slides that I'm going to run through pretty quickly, so let's jump right in, and I'm going to share with you what I believe to be the most important security to-do items for your remote workforce right now. Number one, you have to acknowledge the threats that your users and your business are facing. There's phishing, and not just traditional phishing that tries to lure people in, to click a link, open an attachment, or provide sensitive information, but some more modern attacks that involve things like conversation hijacking, where an attacker takes over someone's email account and is able to mimic the victim's conversation style. There's also phishing that takes place via SMS texts, which is called smishing, and as well as phishing that takes place via voice, which is called vishing. There's also deep fake audio, where criminals could capture someone's voice and then turn around and use it to mimic that person. This could lead to your users getting requests from what appears to be someone in senior management, or maybe even customers or business partners, and you have to ask yourself, how are your users going to respond when they're asked to do something involving confidential information or money or some other sensitive area of the business? That could get ugly in a hurry. If you want to see how this technology could work and also read an interesting story about a popular journalist who's on the radio here in Atlanta, just Google Jamie Dupree 2.0. It's an interesting technology, and it's also a pretty sizable threat, so check that out. There's also identity-related fraudulent requests for things like RFPs, invoices, and other business documents, typically coming in through unprotected or unsecure email configurations, and they're basically being sent on behalf of your business. And this can happen through SPF records and DMARC configurations that are either misconfigured or they're really not configured at all. There's ransomware and distributed denial of service attacks against organizations that are at the heart of this virus situation, including healthcare clinics and hospitals, as well as government agencies. There's a lot going on in that space. And of course, there is Zoom. You may have heard the term Zoom bombing, where uninvited guests are showing up on Zoom meetings and basically crashing the party. So, to Zoom or not to Zoom? Is that the question? Well, Zoom is in the spotlight right now because it's a super popular tool at the moment. I do think that the company is doing its best to address the security and privacy issues that they've been called out on. The reality is, online meetings through their platform can be secured through various configurations. And real quick, if you're looking to lock down Zoom meetings, you can do things like generate random meeting IDs. You can avoid using personal meeting IDs for public events. You can require authentication for users to join your meetings. You can even require multi-factor authentication. You can enable encrypted chat. You can prevent users from sharing their screens. You could disable video, annotation, and so on. There are literally tons of things that you can do to lock it down and have reasonable security. So I say figure out what it is that you need to do that works well based on your specific security and privacy needs. Make those changes and be done with it. Otherwise, there's a dozen other online meeting platforms that you quite likely have at your disposal that you could use instead. Okay, moving on to number 2. Setting security standards. You no doubt already have some more generic security standards. These are the things that make up the fundamental elements of your security program. But in the context of remote working, you need to be very precise on what it is that you want and need in your environment. This should involve things like user authentication and passwords, software updates for workstations, and even tablets and phones, data backups, email, especially as it relates to using and commingling personal and corporate accounts, file sharing and other cloud applications, VPN and whatever type of remote access connectivity you might have. And this is a big one: computer acquisition and disposal, and really configuration of the new computers that people may be getting on their own, and securely wiping of those systems if they decide to sell their old systems. There's also security monitoring, logging, and alerting. How is this going to play out on your remote systems? You may not have any information at all, or it may require technologies like DLP and CASB, maybe even some type of managed service that you can roll out quickly. Now, all of these things sound like policies, right? They can be made into actual policy documents, which are then enforced across your environment, but first, you must have the actual standards in place to build your policies on. So don't take this step lightly. I know you're probably putting out a lot of fires at the moment. Just try to get people on board and, online. That's your number one goal. But in the short term, you really need to think about what your new standards are, because we don't know how long this virus situation is going to drag on. So you need to get with your colleagues and really your security committee and figure out exactly what it is that you're trying to achieve, so that everyone is on the same page and some semblance of mobile computing security can not only be agreed upon but also reached. Number 3. There's an infinite number of things that could happen in your security program right now. What you have to focus on are the things that need your immediate attention. So, what are your known vulnerabilities? What are the vulnerabilities that you suspect but you haven't yet confirmed? Where are your valuable business assets being stored, and how are they being handled? Are your security controls actually working, and how do you know? What can be automated or outsourced to further reduce your risks, maybe even your overall attack surface, and improve overall compliance and security? Ask yourself, what are we doing right? What should we be doing differently? And is what we're doing actually defensible if an incident or breach occurs? And do all this, again, in the context of teleworking and remote access, this new reality that you are living and working in. And another important thing, continue your security testing, your vulnerability and penetration testing, your basic vulnerability scans, your IT controls audits, whatever it is that you've been doing, you need to continue doing it and quite likely do more of it. You have to be able to, find not only your existing vulnerabilities, but also the new stuff that has cropped up as of late, that will crop up just given the new configuration. The last thing you need right now is some low-hanging security fruit to lead to an incident or breach in the middle of all this. Okay, number 4. Based on what you're seeing in terms of threats, both existing and emerging, even security standards that you might need for this new work environment, and then the new risks that you have been able to quantify, you need to update your documentation. And I'm mostly referring to your security policies and procedures here. Your acceptable usage policy is probably going to be one such document, and then of course any policies related to the standards that I brought up, such as passwords, backup, software patching, and all that. You may or may not have actual security standards documented, and if you do, you can update those documents. Perhaps most importantly, you need to be thinking about your incident response plan and your business continuity plan. These two documents can provide guidance on how to handle security events, but both at your level working in IT and security, and of course at the level of your users, and they're going to help you make sure that you can keep the business running. The reason I'm recommending you update your documentation is because many security events that end up being the incidents and breaches that create so much headache are a result of mismatched expectations. Users don't know what's expected of them, they don't know what to do and what not to do. They're out on their own making security decisions on your behalf. Oftentimes having never even seen any sort of security documentation or rules that they must work by. And that is not a good place to be, but it's easy to get there, especially with the new realities of teleworking. So if you thought you didn't have control of your users before, this virus situation is taking things to an entirely new level. And by the way, if you don't currently have any security policies documented, and a lot of people don't, or they have something basic, maybe acceptable usage in the employee handbook, but there are a lot of great resources online where you can go buy or otherwise download security policy templates. You just need to make sure that you're not doing it for the sake of checking a box, but instead basing your policies and procedures on things that your business actually needs, doing it for the greater good of the business. So in order to do that, you need to fully understand where your gaps and security opportunities are. That typically comes in the form of a formal information risk assessment. Really, then and only then will you want to create this security documentation once you understand where things stand. And of course, you need to do whatever you can to put controls in place to actually enforce your rules. Otherwise, your policies, all this documentation will create nothing more than a false sense of security, and this documentation is not going to be worth the paper that it's printed on. So you got to be real careful in your approach to this. Okay, number 5, my last recommendation, and it's all about communication. There are lots of ways to manage your messaging with your employees, but this is largely going to come in the form of online sessions, reminder emails, and maybe videos and some other form, however you're communicating with your employees. Just make sure that you're communicating with them and they're not in the dark. Your messaging focus needs to be on their terms, not yours. And what I mean by that is that you've got to put yourself in the shoes of your users and the current situation that they're in. And rather than simply shoving technical jargon in front of them and telling them what they can't do, think of creative ways to share how they can work remotely in a secure fashion that not only benefits the business, but also them as employees. And part of this is you need to stress that they are the security team. They are a member. Each and every user, each and every employee is a member of your security team. You're all in this together, and without them doing what's right by thinking before they act, there's no reasonable way to ensure security of your business information systems at this point in time, especially how complicated things are. Be sure to get HR or executive management, maybe even both, involved to not only flesh out your policies and security documentation, but also for socialization of your messages and ideas. And I think this is going to help increase the likelihood of buy-in and making sure that these things stick long term. Odds are that you already have a security awareness and training platform, and if so, that's great. Keep using it. If anything, you might want to lighten up on the traditional phishing testing that you've been doing, and instead just use the platform to get information out to your users in a timely and measurable fashion over the coming weeks. And be sure to check out the free resources that I've come across recently online. Lucy Security has an entire website dedicated to user education and getting messages out in this time. It's called workfromhome.education, and SANS has their work from home deployment kit. So be sure to check those out. And as you're going through all this, thinking about specific ideas to share with your users, you could talk to them about 1,000 things, but some stuff that came to my mind is, not using business-related login credentials on personal websites, thinking about the consequences of clicking no or later when prompted to install software updates, how they're handling data backups and file storage, what to do and not do, thinking before installing new software, and of course, updating their systems when their software does prompt them to do so, encrypting their laptops and mobile devices if they're not already. And you could even create a short video or webinar and write an article showing your users what exploits actually look like. Show them the screenshots from Metasploit or similar tools from your most recent vulnerability and penetration testing. Explain to them what can happen when software updates don't get applied or when they choose to use weak passwords, things like that. Most importantly, focus on the security basics. All this common sense stuff that I've been talking about. And the reason being, that's where you're going to get the return, because those are the items that are overlooked the most often and are therefore exploited the most often. The goal should be to set expectations, enforce your rules, and then test and refine over time. And you make your decisions around the concept of we enable work. Whether you're in IT or security or some other function within the organization, think about all this in the context of we enable work. And I think that's really going to help. And this is how you're going to get your payoff. So time is of the essence right now. Your head's down and you're going to be for the foreseeable future. Just don't forget to take in the lessons that you're being taught along the way. John Maxwell said, experience gives the test first and then lessons afterwards. And I've also heard it said that experience is something you don't get until just after you need it. So look for the lessons so you can get better. Folks, these are challenging times in IT and security, and I certainly don't envy you. Just know that if you do all the right things, there will be positive outcomes. There is light at the end of this tunnel. We're going to get through this together, and you're going to be much wiser and much stronger on the other side. And if everything falls into place due to good decision making and focused efforts, you're going to have a much more resilient network environment as well, and that's pretty cool. Thanks for joining me, and I wish you the best of luck with everything.